Hi, I'm Brian, our Fat Dad from Fat Dad's Wood Shop. I don't know a lot of woodworkers that don't wish that they could mill their own lumber. And with an Alaskan mill, you can. Fat Dad Wood Shop. I'm on location today at a place that has recently had a tornado rip through it. And as it happens, that leaves a whole lot of trees torn down, and it gives us the opportunity to take some of those trees that would normally just rot in the woods and turn them into some useful lumber. And of course, what you need for that is a sawmill. Now, there's several different types of sawmills. You're probably acquainted with the bandsaw type sawmills. They also have circular sawmills. This is an Alaskan mill. It's based on a chainsaw. You have a bracket that is clamped to the chainsaw bar, and this bracket can be set for different heights, and it allows you to cut slabs of wood from logs and make your own lumber. Now, there's pluses and minuses to every kind of sawmill. The bandsaws are expensive, fairly large. They require a fair amount of tuning, and you can break the bands on stuff like nails and other things. The circular sawmills have a lot of the same drawbacks, although they are a little bit more robust, but they still leave a fairly large kerf that the bandsaw sawmills don't leave. And then you have a sawmill like this one. This is fairly inexpensive. It's very portable. It runs almost anywhere. You don't need any kind of a generator or a power source to run one. But they are a lot of manual labor, and they leave a very large kerf. So basically, if you buy an expensive large bandsaw or circular saw bandsaw, that would be better for milling lumber for other people for actually a profit. But if you're making your own lumber for your own use, something like this is probably a better setup. Now, using an Alaskan mill requires that you have some knowledge, especially safety knowledge, on how to use a chainsaw. These can be relatively dangerous. Using one as an Alaskan mill is actually not too bad, because a lot of what's going on is actually, there's actually a bracket in between you and the moving chain for a lot of this. But these things can still get you if you're not very careful. The Alaskan mill requires a minimum of 65 cc's to run their saw. This is about a 73. This is one of the bigger saws that you can actually buy. There are a few bigger ones out there. This has, I believe, a 32-inch bar, and the longer the bar that you use, the more power that you need. These large chainsaws can be a lot to handle. So you really need to be up on your chainsaws when you use one of these things. Another thing with ripping boards with a chainsaw is that the normal chainsaw blade uses a 30-degree rake, or the angle of this cutting tooth is 30 degrees. A rip chain is a 10-degree rake. If you put a rip chain on something that you're going to use for making lumber, that's great, but you have to absolutely remember that a rip chain can only be used for ripping, and if you try to cross cut with a rip chain, you stand a very good chance of having very dangerous kickback. So make sure that you only put a rip chain on a saw that's being used as a mill. The adjustments for the height of the bracket are made by loosening and tightening these U-bolts here and there, and very wisely they made them the same size as this tool that's commonly used for chainsaws. Now, the way that an Alaskan mill works is that this guide actually rides on top of a flat surface as the saw cuts underneath it to create two parallel planes on the log. And in order to get your first cut flat, you need a jig. We made this jig out of some 2x4s, and what you do is you screw this jig to the top of your log, and you make your first cut with that bracket riding on top of the jig. And you set your jig so it's low enough so that the chain passes underneath the screws that are holding the jig to the top. And what happens is you get a piece that looks like this when you're done cutting. And then you get a flat surface underneath it. Now, we've milled a few pieces off of this log already, but now I'm going to show you what it looks like to cut a piece off this log. Now, cutting the slab off the top of this log took about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I have sped the video up to double speed so that you don't have to watch it in its entirety at slow speed. But you will see that it's a very isometric exercise, although I am trying to let the saw do most of the work. It's very important that you have a sharp chain on your chainsaw in order to do this, and that may mean that you need to sharpen the chain on your chainsaw every 2 to 3 slabs. It depends on the hardness of the wood that you are cutting. This is red oak, and red oak can be very hard on saw blades. But this is real manual labor, and if you do this for a long time, you will feel it in your joints and in your back. Now, my helper is putting a wedge in the back of the log in order to keep the slab from pinching on the saw blade as I'm cutting through. And he will just make sure that there's some of the pressure is off of that blade. And as I'm cutting through here, you can see that I'm just letting that saw melt its way right through the blade. Now, we have this log up on stands so that I don't have to be doing this on the ground, which is a lot more work even yet. But if you want to slab off lumber on the ground out in the woods somewhere, that is something that can be done, although it is a huge amount of work. In addition to making sure that you have plenty of fuel and you have a good sharp chain, you're going to want to make sure that your bar oil is topped off, because your saw is running pretty much nonstop when you're making these slabs, and you will run through bar oil a lot faster than you normally would when you're doing a bunch of cross cutting. So you want to bear in mind that this is pretty tough on the saw, it's pretty tough on you. So just keep that in mind. Now, this will need to get planed as you have to do with any rough cut lumber, but even though the chainsaw may seem like a crude device, it creates beautiful results. Now, I'm going to put that slab in here to dry. It may take up to a year to dry because this is 2 inches thick. Some of this thinner stuff dries a little faster, and it's a good idea to have a moisture meter, and you can get them fairly inexpensively for sometimes around $10 or $15. But you just check it with the moisture meter until it's down around 7 to 10%, and then it should be ready for use. Pet Dad Woodshop.